All right, everyone, welcome to the Tonto's Demise Week 12 recap. Unfortunately for Kevin Bean, the Isotopes are still in it, actually back in the playoff hunt. So sorry for disappointing you, Kevin. What can I say? That's what I do best. Let's see, another interesting week. We had lots of early games. Thanksgiving, we had a kind of drunken podcast. It was a bit of a mess. Hopefully, anybody who listened to it was able to make it through. Couple things that I'm kind of disappointed about forgetting about. First of all, was when we were doing the previews, the matchup previews. I can't believe that it just completely slipped my mind about Detling having Ben Roethlisberger on his bench, and he picked up and was starting Brian Hoyer, which made absolutely zero sense to me at all. I think, like I mentioned it a little bit on the message boards, as someone who's followed the Seattle Seahawks defense all season, they've been okay, but they really they're just not getting sacks or turnovers. Most of the points, whenever I use them, has been relying on keeping the yardage low, but they've done poorly against some good teams like Carolina, Arizona Cardinals, I believe, a couple weeks ago, which was that was the game with the dancing Drew Stanton. Teams with a good aerial attack really showed how you can go in and beat Seattle. I expected this to be a high-scoring game. It pretty much played out the way that I thought it was going to. Not to toot my own horn, but so both defenses kind of weak, both offenses good. So I kind of expected this one to go back and forth. And as long as Roethlisberger was healthy, even though Richard Sherman was going to shadow Antonio Brown all game, it wasn't going to make too much of a difference because they've got enough other weapons. Bryant, Heath Miller, D'Angelo, and obviously in this game, Marcus Wheaton really stepped up, had a huge game. I expected it was pretty much what I expected, and Roethlisberger had 65, 70, almost 70 points, I think, compared to Hoyer's 35 or so. So, we'll get to that. Was definitely the difference maker in that matchup. But we'll get to that whenever we get to it. The other thing I forgot to mention, I'm really upset about myself, is I completely forgot about the Antonio Brown jersey shirt, whatever you want to call it. I had Sally and Jim both there, and Detling, who criticized it for not being a jersey. It was just a shirt. Why would I do that? But I said it was a gift from them. Sally wouldn't defend her actions against him earlier this year whenever we were in Florida for the review, and then I completely forgot. I had all of them in the room at a table together, and I forgot to mention it. We could have had her maybe got an apology from Detling to her for dissing the gift from her to me. But anyway, so that's pretty much it as my nonsense rambling. So let's get right into this past week's matchups. First, we had the defending champ going up against Vanilla, trying to play spoiler here, maybe knock him down in the standings a little bit. Well, I guess, real quick here, I'm disappointed because however unlikely it was, I was talking about last week, we did have the potential to have, I think, 7 and 6 teams finishing the regular season, but the Isotopes held up their end of the deal. Twerkin held up his end. He took down the Rook. FC did his part. He took down Vanilla. But unfortunately, like I said, Huber Squashers did not use Ben Roethlisberger, which was the difference here. And so he lost to Dub C, which ruined that. Plus also, Mighty Midgets, he did not defeat Chips, my boy, knocking him down to 5-7. So no way he could finish 7-6. So 3 people did it, 2 people didn't. So I'm a little disappointed, but unfortunately, it was very unlikely anyway. So, but it would have been fun, don't you think, to have all those teams with the same record? And it was possible, but not plausible. So anyway, back to this matchup. FC Bohoric defeats Vanilla. The final score here was 148.5 to 141.75. Close matchup. This one actually came down to Monday night. FC Bohoric was trailing Vanilla by about 22 and a half, something like that. So he needed at least 23 from the Baltimore Ravens defense. Vanilla was finished. So, yeah, he needed at least 23. 22 would not have been enough. And he actually was not winning. He would have lost this matchup right up until the final play of the game, which, as you may or may not know, was a blocked field goal attempt by the Browns kicker, Travis Coons. And it was ran all the way back for a touchdown, which meant Baltimore won the game. So that was a 12-point play, blocked kick, touchdown, get the win. And that projected FC Bohoric to the victory here, because as you can see, he won by only 7 points. So if it wasn't for that, he would have gotten the -3 and would have definitely lost this matchup. Let's see, Drew Brees, disappointing matchup though for him. He only had 33 points. Demaryius Thomas, I think they threw the ball to him about 15 times. Somehow he could not catch it. He had 1 catch for 36 yards, and that was it. Stevie Johnson, been a pretty good play most of the year. He had 22 points. Vincent Jackson, 11.5. Garrett Blunt's only 2.5. C.J. Anderson, one of the biggest players to come out of that Broncos-Patriots game, including the final overtime game-winning touchdown. He had 2 touchdowns and 113 yards. So he got you about, let's say, 26 or so. Greg Olson, 12 points. C.J. Spiller, just once again, in the flex, a killer here all year long. Feel like I'm saying that over and over. Only 2.5 points from him. McManus, let's see, a couple PATs, made a field goal, missed a field goal. And again, Baltimore Ravens defense. Yahoo says 20. I believe it was closer to 30 or so. Yeah. Because he needed 23 and he won by 7. So it was about 30, 31, 32, somewhere in that ballpark. As for Vanilla, he actually benched Tom Brady this week in favor of Eli Manning. Let's see. Eli got you 44. Taking a look at your bench here real quick. Tom Brady actually had 49. So it wasn't the best play, but you still would have lost. I don't think there was a long touchdown in this matchup from Brady. Actually, was there? Was the Bolden touchdown a long touchdown, I want to say? So that would have been 52. So an 8-point difference. You keep Tom Brady in, you win this matchup, right? Let me check here if I can see it real quick. Oh, I'm sorry. Brandon Bolden's touchdown was only 63 yards, so not long enough for the bonus. So I stand corrected. I thought it was longer than that, but anyway, you still would have lost with Eli or Tom Brady. Eric Decker, he's back with scoring touchdowns, 5 for 60 and a touch. Randall Cobb, 13 points. Surprisingly quiet game. Maybe this was the difference in this one too. DeAndre Hopkins, only 8.5 points this week. Let's see, that might be... let's take a quick look here. Yeah, 8.5 points is DeAndre Hopkins' lowest output of the entire season. So kudos to you, FC Bohoric, for getting lucky there. Chris Johnson, who's been pretty good, pretty consistent all year long. Only 17 yards. I believe he's injured because it looks like he is on the IR now for breaking something in his leg. So it looks like he's done for the year. So Vanilla, you're gonna have to start. Looks like you're gonna have to start playing Alfred Morris, which at this point isn't doesn't seem like a very bad idea. Seems like disappointed that he was on the waiver wire for so long, and I don't know why I didn't pick him up. But anyway, so it goes. Forte, only 44 yards. Vernon Davis, only 3 points. You had Deshaun Jackson in the flex. I think you bounce back and forth each week between Deshaun Jackson or Tavon Austin. And for some reason, you keep picking the wrong one. So Deshaun Jackson, you had him in your flex. He had 14.5, while Tavon Austin actually would have gotten you 21. So there was a 7-point difference there, exactly 7. So, if you had started Tavon Austin in your flex, you would have won by 0.25, but you didn't. Jets defense had a pretty good game, at least until the end. Looks like they had a couple turnovers, but they didn't give up a whole lot of points, at least until the end. Like, this game was a blowout. Against the Dolphins, I believe pretty much the entire fourth quarter was garbage time. So Ryan Tannehill padded his stats. Jarvis Landry padded his stats. A couple of other people from them. So that definitely took away from the Jets there. If this had been a more competitive game, the outcome might have been different here. So a lot of little things, unfortunately for you, Vanilla, that didn't work out your way. But that's the way it goes. So you're gonna have to. So once again, I said you lost Chris Johnson, so you're gonna have to probably plug in Alfred Morris the rest of the way, or do whatever you please with your team. As for FC Bohoric, he gets this win and he moves up to 4-8. But unfortunately, he's still down in 11th place, and he will be on the outside looking in come playoff time. As for Vanilla, he is now 7-5. He is in 4th place. I believe his point total is still pretty high, so even if he loses in week 13, it would take all sorts of craziness, I think, for him to drop out of playoff contention, which would be kind of funny because he has been there all season long, up near the top. So for him to drop off, let's see, looking at the people who could possibly knock him out. He's way ahead in points right now of Chips and the Huber Squashers. So even if you lose this week, Vanilla, you're most likely clinched in your playoff spot. I would give it about a 95% chance that you are clinched. All right, let's move right on up the list here on my computer screen. We got the Mighty Midgets going up against Chips, my boy. This was basically the season for Mighty Midgets. He needed to get the win, which would have knocked Chips to 6-6 and would have moved him up to 6-6. Unfortunately for Mighty Midgets, did not go his way for several reasons, which we'll get into here. Chips, my boy, takes this one down. Final score, 171.25 to 139.5. Let's see. So we had about, a 32-point difference here. So let's see. Chips, my boy, Carson Palmer, 44 points. Amari Cooper, 18.5. Jordan Matthews, touchdown, garbage time touchdown on Thanksgiving there at the end, helped you out. Kamar Aiken on Monday night, pretty good game from him, 6 for 80 and a touchdown, and even 20 points. Adrian Peterson, he's been on a tear the past few weeks, over 150 yards rushing, two touchdowns. So he got you, what about 18 and 12, 30 points. Chris Ivory, 80 yards and a touchdown. Ben Watson, 9.5 points. Justin Dierick, 9.5 points. Michael Floyd in the flex, hoping that he would have a huge game coming off of whatever injury it is that he has. But unfortunately, he only had one catch for 14 yards. Your kicker, Novak, made a field goal and kicked a couple PATs. And your Green Bay Packers defense, let's see, they got you, Yahoo says 7. They lost. They only had 1 sack, but the point totals were low. I think yardage wasn't too bad. So it was probably right around 7, in the 7 to 12 ballpark, right in there. So some pretty decent scores, gets you up over the hump here for taking down Mighty Midgets. Looking at his roster, he had Matt Ryan. Another kind of disappointing game for him. No touchdowns, I think. At least it's not showing any here. 2 interceptions, that hurts. He was outscored actually by Brandon Marshall, your main receiver, who's been steady all year long. Let's see what Brandon Marshall's ranking. He's got to be in the... His ranking here says 22, but man, he's been... If not, he's definitely been... The value of him this year is better than that. Like, I forget where he was drafted. I can't see it on the draft board, which is sitting in a kind of a crumpled pile in the corner there. You can't quite see it anyway. Matt Ryan, 31.5. Brandon Marshall, 34. Brandon LaFell, only 7.5. Allen Robinson, 550 and a touchdown. Latavius Murray, 60 yards. Jonathan Stewart, 70 yards. Barnage, pretty good game, 16 points from him. But probably the biggest problem here, outside of quarterback for you, was DeMarco Murray, only 3 points. It had him in the flex. They got blown out by the Detroit Lions. How does DeMarco Murray not catch a single pass, like in garbage time? Throw him some passes, maybe get him a touchdown or 2. It's really, I don't know. The Eagles just rumor is that they've given up on the coach and they don't want to play, and so blah 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 blah. I don't know. So it's just been a fairly all-around disappointing season for anyone who was invested in the Eagles. Even though Chips Mavoy may have something. He may have something to say about that, but he's using Carson Palmer, so he must have lost faith in Sam Bradford, who happens to also be injured, of course. But anyway, you had Josh Brown, your kicker, only 2 PATs from him, and Kansas City defense, after a big game last week, thought maybe they'd put up another one against Buffalo. But Sammy Watkins went off against them. They did have a couple turnovers, but they gave up a lot of yards and a bunch of points. Yahoo says 10. It was probably a little bit more than that, but it wasn't enough. Like I said, only 30 from Matt Ryan. Let's see. Really outside of Brandon Marshall, I said Allen Robinson got a touchdown, but really no touchdowns or anything from most of your guys. Said no touchdowns from your quarterback. That always hurts. And that said, DeMarco Murray, that's 3 points there. So even though your flex players totaled 5.4 points here, just wasn't enough for Mighty Midgets. Seems like that's been the story of his season, just not quite enough. He moves to 5-7. He's down in 9th place. And let's see. He is not technically eliminated from the playoffs. Actually, he might. I would have to look at the standings here. He might be. It would, because there's really only going to be one spot up for grabs right now. I think it's that number 6 spot. And even if midgets can win in week 13 and have a bunch of, it would take everybody else who is 6-6 to lose and all be 6-7, which would mean, I think the isotopes, if that happened, the isotopes are too far ahead of you in points. So you would most likely not make it. I'll get back to this. Do a little standings analysis when I finish up with the matchups here. Anyway, so Chips is 7-5. You are in 5th place. You are actually not a lock for the playoffs either, but we'll get to that here a little bit later. Moving right along, we had Twerkin Bowl Cuts going up against the Rook, Frankenstein's Monster, who has actually been kind of quiet these past couple of weeks. Not the dominant force that we thought he might be. All sorts of things going on that have happened to detrimental to his team and his lineup. But anyway, after losing a couple games, Twerkin bounces back here, knocks off the Rook. Final score is 158.85 to 142.6. Let's see. This was the battle of the Twerkins draft quarterbacks, Bortles versus Aaron Rodgers. And you guys can laugh all you want about Aaron Rodgers, but he was outscored by 21 points this week by Blake Bortles. And let's see. If you look at Aaron Rodgers over the past, let's see. Look at Aaron Rodgers since week 5. Even we could go to we can go back to week 4. Week 4, 40 points. Week 5, 35. Week 6, 38. 7 was his bye. Week 8, 21 points. Week 9 and week 10, he had 63 each of those weeks. But now he is back to week 11, 37 points, and this week 36. So that's a lot of under 40-point performances this year from Aaron Rodgers. So before we go, crowning him as the monster quarterback that, we know he is, but it seems a lot of the times that we are judging him based on his previous year's performances and maybe not looking so much at this year's numbers. I feel like whenever I'm listening to the podcast, it's been that way for a long time though. It seems to me at least that we get blinded by the names, the spotlight names, Aaron Rodgers, Adrian Peterson, and don't look at the numbers, which the numbers sometimes speak for themselves. Let's look at Blake Bortles since week 4, much like Aaron Rodgers. Blake Bortles since week 4, 50 points, 56 points, 56 points, 27 points. Bye week, 49 points, 38 points, 33 points, and now 57.5 points this week. So right around 50, above 50, most of those weeks. One dud, couple 30-point games. But let's see. Those numbers over the course of the season. You're probably getting better production week to week from Blake Bortles than you're getting from Aaron Rodgers. So knock Bortles all you want and knock Josh all you want for making that trade. I don't dismiss him. Yeah, it was fun to maybe last week or two whenever Bortles had his 2 down games to maybe poke and prod at Josh a little bit for not having Aaron Rodgers anymore. But we had some trade negotiations going on, maybe a little bit of talk back and forth, and I think I told him weeks ago I was actually more interested in Blake Bortles than I was in Aaron Rodgers. So I don't know if that uh, sent off some red flags in his mind and said, well, that's if he wants Blake Bortles, there must be something going on there. So, and he traded away Aaron Rodgers and decided to roll with him. So, should I at least talk? Maybe I should talk about the actual matchup here. So, said Bortles, 58 points. Larry Fitzgerald, 10 catches. Unfortunately, only 66 points, 66 yards, I should say. No touchdowns or anything. So 16 and a half. Emmanuel Sanders, 17. Travis Benjamin, who actually Twerkin was a little bit behind going into Monday night, so he needed something from Travis Benjamin. He needed about 5 for 6 points. Fortunately, Benjamin had 6 catches for 90 yards and a touchdown, and even 22 points. That was enough to push you over the edge here and knock off the Rook. Yeldon, 3.5 points. Rawls, 80 yards and a touchdown. Eifert, 13 points. Diggs in the flex, 7 points. Janikowski, 1 field goal and a couple PATs. And your Rams defense, fortunately for you, they didn't cost you a win here. Looks like they had 1 turnover. They gave up too many points. They gave up a ton of yards. Yahoo says 6. It was probably right around there, if not a little bit less, maybe, because I think they gave up a whole bunch of yards too. So, as for the Rook, said only 36 points from Aaron Rodgers. Alshon Jeffrey, 16. Dez Bryant, 4.5 points. So he was talking about some problems here with his team, as we know. Once again, Tony Romo re-injured his collarbone. He is now gone for the rest of the season. Also, this was a bad matchup against the Carolina Panthers. And so Matt Castle went in, had to fill in for Romo. Looks like he's going to be filling in for the rest of the season, which is not good news for people who own Dez Bryant, like Gags this year. So we'll have to wait and see what happens. Odell Beckham Jr., usual game for him. 140 yards, 9 catches, a touchdown. Crazy touchdown catch from him. Diving play, pretty nice. Not too many people would even be able to make that play outside of him and maybe Antonio Brown. McFadden, he was not flexed, but he got you, I see a 2-point conversion, and I'm only seeing his receiving stats here. So he must have only got you, 8. He only got you about 3 or 4 points. Gurley, only 2 points from him after blowing up whenever he was healthy enough to start playing. He was tearing up the league for a few weeks there, but now he has gone quiet. Even though he's been able to get some touchdowns, he's been his point totals have been trailing downward the past 6 weeks. He's been going down. From week 7 to week 12, his point total has progressively gotten lower and lower, and and lower. So, Rook probably hoping for a bounce back these last few weeks of the season from Gurley. Travis Kelce, 70 yards and a touchdown, 17 points from him, 17 points from McCoy, and your kicker, Santos, couple field goals, couple PATs, about 12 or 13 points from him. And New England defense, probably also a difference maker here. They had 1 turnover, a couple sacks, but as you know, they lost that game, gave up too many points, gave up a lot of yards. So Yahoo says 6. It was probably right around that total, which isn't good enough for you to get a win. So, like I said, a bunch of low performances from some of your big names. So, and that's going to happen. That's just going to be the way it goes, maybe, from here week to week for you, Gags. Like I said, you're going to be hoping for Des Bryant, Alshon Jeffrey to stay healthy. You need Aaron Rodgers to maybe turn it around a little bit, pick up the pace. Gurley to pick up the pace. So it's going to be interesting. I mean, anything can happen. So everyone was kind of scared of your team a few weeks ago, but you never know what's going to happen. So, I mean, it's like I said, you got Bryant, Romo's gone again, so you might have to. Well, I'm not going to give you, any advice on what I think you should do with your lineup. So that's in your hands, not my. I don't want to have to take any blame later on. So anyway, the Rook, you're still in first place. You are 9-3, even with this loss. While Twerkin, unfortunately, you are still down in 8th place, but you are 6-6, and you still have a decent chance at making the playoffs. Let's see, next matchup, we had the Dub C Hooligans, like I said, going up against Hewer Squashers, and Dub C was able to take this one down. Final score here was 200.15 to 180.25. Actually, a really good matchup after Thanksgiving, even though, let's see, Matthew Stafford had 68 points. Carolina had 47. So I believe Dub C, you actually had about, 115 points just from your quarterback and your defense. So you managed to get about 85 from the rest of your lineup, which is not too bad. You probably were hoping for a little bit more to maybe push you up in the overall point totals, but it was good enough for a win here. I think, yeah, it looked great for you in terms of, Stafford having a huge game, 68 points from him. But, I mean, the problem here for you in this matchup was, and even though we were all like, "Ooh, Stafford and Carolina, got huge points," most of Stafford's points and a lot of his passing, his touchdowns, 3 of his touchdowns went to Calvin Johnson. So Calvin Johnson actually ended up with 35 points, which is a huge wide receiver score. Often that can be enough to single-handedly defeat your entire receiving core, which actually it did, because so you caught a huge break here, really, if you think about it, Dub C, because Crabtree had 12, Cooks had 8.5, and Hearns had 8.5. So 16, 27, 28 points. So your entire wide receiver core was outscored just by Calvin Johnson. So that really gives, if you get a decent game from Hewer Squashers, gets a good game from his quarterback, I mean, that kind of balances the score right back out, which he did. I mean, he got his receiving core absolutely crushed yours. Like I said, Calvin Johnson outscored them all by himself with 35 points. T.Y. Hilton had 27.5, and Randall had 10.5. So real quick, that's 62, 62, 72, 73. So about 73 points from his 3 receivers to your 27, 28. So even that's a 50-point swing. You had Ware versus Hillman. Ware had 100 yards and a touchdown. Hillman had 60 yards and a touchdown. Andrews for you had 32 yards, while D'Angelo Williams 88 is his receiving stats. Let's see. So that was definitely a problem here for Hewer Squashers. Trying to decide each week, who you're going to flex. Kind of have to flex Danny Woodhead, because that's really where most of his value is. But you actually lost 15, almost 16 points just from not flexing D'Angelo Williams. He only had about 30 yards rushing, and he did have a touchdown for you. Let's see, Gronkowski, he had, 21 points. Heath Miller had 9.5. Unfortunately, both guys got injured. Uh, as for Heath Miller, it was a lot earlier in the game, which uh, was definitely could have been a factor on this matchup because if you watched early on in the game, Roethlisberger was throwing passes to Heath Miller like crazy before he got hurt. So it said Heath Miller 9.5 points, Justin Diak 9.5 points. Heath Miller could have had a huge game if he doesn't get that rib injury. But Gronk said 21 points. Lamar Miller versus Danny Woodhead. Miller only 4.5. Woodhead 10.7. Gostowski, 1 field goal, couple PATs. Bailey for Huber Squashers, 2 field goals. And let's see. Like I said, Carolina defense, another huge game, 47 points. Arizona, let's see, a couple turnovers, kept the point total pretty low. But I think overall, San Francisco actually didn't do too bad. I think Blaine Gabbert was up over 300 yards passing. So you would have liked to maybe get a little bit more from him, or from them, I should say, but it wasn't quite enough. Said 180 points, that's a pretty good score. That's going to get you a win more often than not. But you were already kind of behind the 8 ball with Stafford and Carolina getting 115. But the difference here is pretty simple. You picked up Brian Hoyer. Thought he would have a huge game against the Saints defense. Instead of sticking with your boys, Ben Roethlisberger, or even Kirk Cousins. Let's see, Kirk Cousins, there was about a 13-point difference. So you still would have lost if you'd used Cousins. But if you had used Ben Roethlisberger, I mean, there's at least a 30-point difference between those two quarterbacks. So you would have taken this one down if you had stuck with your boy, Ben Roethlisberger. But you got scared, and you tinkered, and it did not work out. And that possibly could have cost you your season here. We'll have to wait and see, because you are now 6-6. You are in 7th place, Huber Squashers. And WC Hooligans, he actually jumps up all the way to 3rd. He is 8-4. So, okay, I believe, so I didn't do each team individually. I got most of those matchups here going back and forth between comparing your lineups here. So, okay, let's see. Who else? We had Possum Magic going up against the Raritan Pups. Basically, a W you can pencil in for most everyone who's played him this year. Even though Raritan Pups actually put up a decent score for his standards this year. It was not nearly enough going up against Possum, as he went for 211.3 points to the Raritan's 147.5. This one was pretty quickly, I think, because just watching the highlights from a lot of the early games, basically Possum's team went off this week whenever he didn't really need them to. Probably wishing they could have waited maybe a week or two to have this big game, because let's see, Rivers, big bounce back from him. You had Rivers and Antonio Gates. Gates had 2 touchdowns. Rivers had 64 points. Gates had 21. And AJ Green, 2 touchdowns from him. 6 for 60 and 2 touchdowns. Sammy Watkins, 6 for 158 and 2 touchdowns. So you got 64 from Rivers, 24 from Green, 37 from Watkins. Anquan Bolden, 17 points. Doug Martin, just under 100 yards. Ingram, 5 points. San Antonio Gates, 21 points. You had Duke Johnson in the flex, even 10 points from him. Hauschka, a couple PATs and a missed PAT. no field goals. And your Denver defense won the game, but they did give up a lot of yards, a lot of points. So they had 1 turnover and a couple of sacks. So Yahoo says 9. It was probably a little bit more than that, probably closer to 15 or 20, somewhere in there, I would guess. I can't remember off the top of my head. But as for the Pups, good game from Derek Carr, 54 points. Let's see. Marvin Jones from Cincinnati. Looks like you got 5.5 points there. Nate Washington, 7 points. Moncrief, actually finally a good game from him. Almost 20 points. Jeremy Hill, 8.5 points. Let's see. Is it Thompson from Washington? Is his name Chris Thompson? I can't remember. Let me see. Yes, Chris Thompson. He got you, let's see, less than 1 point because he only had 7 rushing yards. Jimmy Graham, 11.5 points. Unfortunately, he did something to his knee, and he is also done for the year. Let's see. You had Doug Baldwin in the flex. He was a big factor this week. He actually had 3 touchdowns, almost 40 points from him. Did he have an 80-yard touchdown? Was that first play? You know what? I might have to fix your score because I think I missed that 80, the long touchdown bonus for you. I want to say I missed that, so I'm gonna have to figure that. Now that I'm thinking about it, so I'm pretty sure I did miss that. Anyway, I'll get back to it. I'll recheck your score here whenever I'm done. Your kicker, I think he is actually injured, and so he didn't play. So he got you 0. Even though, let me take a look at your bench. You actually do have 2 kickers, so you could have plugged somebody in, but you didn't, which I guess we can't really hold against you because football was the least of your worries this past weekend. And your Eagles defense, as I said before, they got slaughtered by the Lions. Yahoo says 2. I think that might be correct. Or maybe it was 5. So, again, actually a pretty decent score for the Pups this year, thanks to Derek Carr's 54, Moncrief's 20, and Doug Baldwin's 38.5, which should be 41.5. Like I said, I'm pretty sure I did forget that long touchdown. I'll go back and fix that here. As for the Possum Magic, he is still in second place, 9-3, but I believe he is hot on the heels of the Rook. Only less, I think the overall point total difference is less than a point. So it's gonna be a battle here for first place, and so the regular season champion, the money for that, it's gonna come down to whoever has a better score here next week. Well, you both have to win and have a good score. So that's what's going on with Possum. As for the Pups, you are now 1-11. You are still in 12th place, and you will be sporting the Phillip Rivers jersey next season. All right, and finally, we had the Springfield Isotopes going up against the Detonators. This one started out not so good for the Isotopes, who put in Tony Romo. So the Isotopes take this one down. The final score here ended up being 187.35 to 180.85. So two really good scores. Unfortunately, it wasn't quite enough for the Detonators to take this one down. So the Isotopes went with Romo, who got hurt. He threw 3 interceptions. He actually only had 7.5 points whenever he went out, and Matt Castle came in, threw a bunch of dump-off passes, actually did get a touchdown at the end. I believe he tacked on uh, about 24 points, actually, just coming in with his completions. The touchdown, he had a 2-point conversion to McFadden. He had about 10, I think he had 10 rushing yards. So he actually came in and quickly outscored anything that Romo had done up to that point in the game, which I think it was pretty much garbage time anyway. So by that point, let's see. Julio Jones, 10.5. Antonio Brown, 11. Golden Tate, 18 points. Abdullah, 6 points. Plugged in Niall Davis, hoping that maybe he would get a timeshare with Spencer Ware, but that was not to be this week. I think he had 1 carry for 1 yard. Jordan Reed, almost 18 points. Jarvis Landry, he actually had just under 40 points, 38.9. He had 13 catches, over 160 yards, and a touchdown, which the previously mentioned garbage time by the Dolphins, which pumped up the Detonators' score from Ryan Tannehill. Unfortunately, a lot of those points went to Jarvis Landry. So much like the Stafford to Calvin Johnson connection there, we had Tannehill to Landry, which those connections, if they're in the same matchup, always favor the receiver because you're getting more points for the touchdowns and more points for the yardage. So even though it looks impressive that Tannehill and Stafford got 60, 68 points each, but when the receiver that you're going up against does 38 points, 35 points, that can almost single-handedly balance out your opponent's receiving core here. So anyway, because I had Landry, 38.9. Maybe probably the biggest difference here was in that Cowboys game, Carolina Cowboys. Graham Gano, the Carolina kicker, kicked a bunch of field goals, a couple PATs. He actually had, I think he had about 18.5 points. While Detonators only got 1 point from his kicker. So a 17-point difference there. That's huge in a 7-point matchup. Bengals defense, I believe their total was, Yahoo says 22. I think it was 34. So pretty good there. As for the Detonators, like I said, 60 points from Tannehill. Pretty good. Let's see, it was actually just slightly under his best performance of the year. He has been treading in the 30s and 40s all year long. But he jumped up to 60 here, like I said, with all that garbage time. Mike Evans, 11 points. Perhaps one of the biggest factors here, Jeremy Maclin, in making this one close, was Jeremy Maclin. He had 9 catches, 160 yards, and a touchdown, 34 points from him. So that those 34 points almost single-handedly defeats the Isotopes' whole entire receiving core, just from that big performance. So let's see. Martavis Bryant, 19 points. I actually think it was a little bit less because his touchdown was a rushing touchdown, so you lost that yardage. Sims, your running back, most of his points came from catches, so that balanced out between Niall Davis and Sims. So Niall Davis 0.1 and Sims got 0.8, so those pretty much cancel each other out. Alfred Blue, 70 yards and a touchdown. Let's see. Delaney Walker, 15 points. You had Buck Allen, on Monday night. So you actually had a chance to take this one down. Going into Monday night, I think, what did you need? I think you needed 25 points or so. You had him in the flex. He had a receiving touchdown early on in the game. Definitely made me sweat it out till the very end. I was praying for no overtime in that game for Allen to maybe get a chance to maybe catch a couple passes or possibly punch in a touchdown at the end there, and sneak out a win at the end, which would have been just made it pretty painful. But unfortunately, it wasn't to be. Like I said, Sturgis, 1 point from him, definitely a factor here. And also, again, the Steelers' defense, huge factor. Yahoo says 5. Let's see. It was probably right around there. It might have actually been 5 or maybe 7, maybe 8. Because, let's see, 2 sacks, the blocked kick gets canceled out by the loss. You gave up too many points, probably too many first downs. I know you gave up too many receiving yards, but I think the rushing yards were actually okay. So you probably got 5 or maybe 8 at the most. So that was the big difference here. The defenses and kickers, and said Jarvis Landry, you having Tannehill going to Landry. So let's see. I think that's it for this one. Detonators said you tried valiantly to be a spoiler here, but couldn't quite do it. You are 4-8 with this loss. You are in 10th place, while the Isotopes, they move up to 6-6, and they are actually in 6th place. So if the playoffs started today, the Isotopes would be in there. But we are not done yet. Still got 1 week to go. Let's take a little quick preview at what we got coming up here in week 13. Said the Rook and Possum, you're both 9-3. Rook, you are playing, let's see, where are you at? You're playing Chips, important matchup there. Possum, you're playing the Detonators. So no easy matchups for you guys there. Maybe the only easy matchup actually goes to the Dubsy Hooligans. So actually, I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility that the Dubsy Hooligans could jump up and take first place, or at least a bye week. If he can get a win this week and one of you gets a loss, because he's only about 24 points behind. So if Dub C has a good week this week and gets a win, and let's say one of those top 2 guys loses, said Dub C could end up 9-4, and either the Rook or Possum could end up 9-4, and said one of them could drop down to 3rd place, and Dub C could possibly move up and maybe sneak. He could even sneak 1st place or a bye week here, so we'll have to wait and see what happens for Dub C, who, by the way, I should mention he is riding a 6-game winning streak. So how long can that keep going on until something happens here? Maybe it might be best for Dub C to maybe get a loss out of the way now, so that instead of having it happen in next when it really matters, when you lose and you go home. But anyway, let's see. That could happen. Vanilla, you and Chips are both 7-5. Vanilla's going up against Twerkin, who is fighting for a spot. He needs to get that win. Chips, my boy, like I said, you are playing the Rook. Both of you really kind of need to get the win here, because right on your heels, right on Vanilla and Chips, you got right on your heels is the Isotopes, the Huber Squashers, and the Twerkin Bowl Cuts. So, let's see. If those teams potentially if they all win, and let's see, that would mean Vanilla would lose. If they all win and Chips loses, if the Rook can beat Chips, that would mean Vanilla, Chips, the Isotopes, the Squashers, and Twerkin could all end up 7-6. So we could have 5 teams ending up 7-6, which would make it come down to point totals. And it's looking best right now for Vanilla and the Isotopes, Squashers, and, well, never mind. I was gonna say Midgets, but he's probably gonna be out of it. Yeah, it could definitely come down to point totals, but that's assuming, like I said, if Isotopes, Squashers, and Twerkin all get a win this week. No guarantee there. But like I said, well, getting into I was gonna start talking about midgets, but if he wins this week, he's up against the Huber Squashers. He could move to 6-7. He could knock Huber Squashers obviously to 6-7, and he would need the Isotopes to lose, and he would need Twerkin to lose. So the way I'm looking at, but he's actually midgets. You're actually about 130 points behind the Isotopes. So even if you finish 6-7, that would be that's the worst. That's the best you can do, and that's the worst that the Isotopes can do. That's the worst that Huber Squashers can do, and the worst that Twerkin can do. So even if you do win this week, midgets, I am fairly certain that you cannot get it done. You will be eliminated. Said 6-7 is possible here for a 6-7 team to make the playoffs this year, but it can't be the midgets, I believe. Really, the only six. Just looking at the standings here, the only 6-7 team that could possibly make it would be the Isotopes, thanks to their higher point total. At least one of those 3 teams, Isotopes, Huber Squashers, Twerkin, is one of them is probably going to get a win this week. So for them, it's really win and you're in. I think, let's see. So there's a lot of different ways that things could shake out this week. I actually think, let's see, Chips, my boy, if he loses, and let's see, if Isotopes, Huber Squashers, and Twerkin all win this week, and said, if we have all these teams ending up 7-6, it is feasible that Chips, my boy, if he does poorly this week and ends up 7-6, like he could be eliminated from the playoffs, even though he has been up there most of the second half of this season in high playoff contention. It is possible that he could drop out after this week. He needs to put up a pretty good point total because he's behind the Isotopes, he's behind Vanilla, he is just slightly ahead of Huber Squashers. That could be the biggest problem here, I think, for Twerkin, is your point total is about 150 points behind the next person. So even if you win here and get to 7-6, that's the only way you could make the playoffs, Twerkin, is if you win, you would need both the Isotopes and the Huber Squashers to lose. So yes, like I said, I think you already mentioned that you're rooting for Bahoric and, let's see, Jim here. Is it? Yeah. Yeah, you're rooting for Bahoric and Crick to knock us off. But so it's going to be an interesting final week. Like I said, the season is really only done for 4 teams. I'm pretty sure it's the Midgets, Detonators, FC Bahoric, and the Pups. You can still be spoilers here this last week, but it looks like the teams that are in the playoffs right now, the only thing that really could happen is that's number 6 seed could go to one of a couple different teams, and the standings could make a shuffle here. So Dub C Hooligans could move up. He could potentially move all the way up to the top. The Rook and Possum are fighting for it, but you can't count Dub C out right now. If he gets a win and does pretty well, Vanilla, Chips, Isotopes, Huber Squashers, Twerkin, you basically all need to get a win this week to secure your way into the playoffs. So I already mentioned it. We could end up with a bunch of 7-6 teams, which would mean there would be 4. There's potentially 4 playoff teams. No, 3. There would be 3 playoff teams at 7-6, and that would leave 2 of you on the outside looking in. If it falls that way, that would mean probably Twerkin would be out, and possibly either the Squashers or Chips even. Or if it ends up being a 6-7 team, I think the only 6-7 team that could possibly make it would be the Isotopes, based on the schedule, who's playing each other this week, and how the point totals match up. So it's going to be interesting. Nothing's really set in stone yet. There's definitely going to be a little shuffling in the playoff standings here. So we'll see what happens this week. We got some pretty good matchups. It looks like a lot of projections are pretty close. So even though you're out, even if you're out of the playoffs, you still can fight and in the spirit of sportsmanship, go out there and put up a fight and maybe knock somebody out, maybe ruin their season. Always a possibility. Like I said, the projections are pretty close, so it looks like we're going to have some pretty good matchups here this last week. So if you have, right now, really, if you're not the Rook, Possum, or Dub C, you kind of got to sweat it out a little bit here and hope that things fall your way here this last week. So the matchups, I think the matchups are good. There are playoff implications from pretty much every matchup. Yeah, they're all even. I said even the teams that are already eliminated. All the matchups have playoff implications. So go out and do your best. Give it your all this week. Good luck to everyone. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. So we'll see you here again next week to review the last week of the regular season. All right, good luck to everyone coming up here in week 13. Looks like it's going to be a good one. So good luck to everyone, but I'll make Gags happy here and wish especially good luck to me. So, all right, see you next week.